Good evening, everyone. I'm going to call this meeting of the Laramie City Council for July 18th, 2023 to order. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, if you'd like to join us. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It's usually over there.
Thank you, everyone. City Clerk, you can call the roll.
Gabriel.
Here.
Newman.
Here.
O'Doherty.
Here.
Pierce.
Here.
Richardson.
Here.
Shumway.
Here.
Somerville. Absent. Cumby.
Here.
Harrington.
Here.
That's 8 present and 1 absent, Your Honor.
Thank you, City Clerk. We will then move to public comments on non-agenda items. Any members of the public who wish to speak to the council on any item not on the agenda, go ahead and come forward if you're in the room, or raise your hand if you're on Zoom. Come on forward, please.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council.
Welcome. Thank you, City Clerk.
Okay, good afternoon, Mayor, Council. I always try to give other people the chance to speak first because I'm here every other week. But my name is Chris McGlover. I'm a resident here in town. I brought with me today a book. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, and I'd expect that you aren't, but this is what's called the Pilot's Bible. Does anybody want to take a gander at how many pages it is? That's kind of rhetorical. I know you guys can't talk back to me, but it's 1,170 pages long. There are a lot of rules in there. I am responsible for knowing them all. Okay. That is my responsibility as a pilot and in order to maintain safe flight. Now, I hope that that this message here illustrates to you that I'm not concerned with the 30 or so rules that are in the proposed rules and regs out at the airport. What I am concerned with, and several others in the community, are the dozen or so rules that directly violate the Pilot's Bible. And a similar text, the airport compliance manual. There are several rules that directly conflict with federal law, and these just are not being addressed. Last week I gave you an example of how I wasn't able to fix my aircraft. That would be prevented in the current rules and regs. I have the right to do so. Another example is that since I know you guys aren't familiar with this text, that staff of the airport are not going to be held harmless in the event of property damage. That is a direct conflict with state law. You guys should know that. So they're these proposed rules that they're just conflicting with other laws, and it's not that I'm opposing the rules in general. I need rules to maintain safe flight. So that's all that our concerns are for a group. Now, I don't like to talk about negative things all the time. After speaking 2 weeks ago, I was approached by the airport saying that my claims here that I have never requested information from the airport before. They had no record of it. I responded with documents proving that I had requested written information from the airport and never received any. This is a concern. Following up on that email over a week and a half ago, I requested a map for the airport for certain designated areas in these proposed rules and regs. There's SITA, there's non-movement areas, there's areas where you can wash your plane, distances from drains, things like that, that I need to know in order to follow the proposed rules and regs. That information was not given to me as of yet, so it's not that we're opposed to rules, we just don't have the information in order to follow them, and that they are conflicting with current policy. So thank you guys again. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. McGlover, for taking time out of your evening to join us. Any other members of the public wish to speak to any item that's not on the agenda? Okay, seeing none, we will close the public comment period and move to the Vice Mayor for changes to the agenda.
Thank you.
I move that the following changes to the agenda be approved. To add executive session regarding land negotiations, Wyoming State Statute 16-4-405A, Roman numeral 7.
Second.
Motion by the Vice Mayor, second by Councilor Richardson. All those in favor of that change to the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. That change has been added to the agenda. Vice Mayor, I will move to you for setting the agenda.
These pages are
Just for,
oh, it's, I move that we set, that the agenda be set, I move that the agenda be set as changed.
Second.
motion by Vice Mayor Cumby, second by Councilor Gabriel. All those in favor of setting the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the agenda has been set. Council members, we're going to move on to proclamations, public hearings, and notifications, and recognize the city clerk for the first public hearing.
Notice is hereby given that a public hearing of the Laramie City Council will be held at 6:30 p.m. on July 18th, 2023, in the City Council Chambers, Laramie City Hall, 406 Ivinson Avenue, Laramie, Wyoming. The meeting shall be held with both online Zoom and in-person option to take public comments on the following: FP-23-02, a final plat proposing two lots in the Sierra Sky Technology Park. The final plat is located on the parcel of the Underwriters Laboratories at 2212 and 2320 Cumulus, sorry, just kidding, Cumulus Drive. The application has been submitted to the Laramie Chamber Business Alliance. All applications, plans, and specifications relative to these matters are available for review at the City of Laramie Planning Office, 405 Grand Avenue, Laramie, Wyoming. Anyone wishing to be heard should be present or should be present at City Council Chambers or via Zoom.
Thank you, City Clerk. Any members of the public wish to speak during this public hearing, you can go ahead and come forward if you're in the room, or raise your hand on Zoom. Okay. Seeing none, we will close that public hearing, and City Clerk, we'll move on to the next.
Notice is hereby given that a public hearing of the Laramie City Council will be held at 6:30 p.m. on July 18th, 2023, in the City Council Chambers, Laramie City Hall, 406 Ivinson Avenue, Laramie, Wyoming. The meeting shall be held with both online Zoom and in-person option to take public comments on the following: PP-22-03, a preliminary plat proposing a 5.6-acre subdivision consisting of 20 proposed lots. The subdivision is proposed on the undeveloped parcel of land at the corner of 22nd Street and Beaufort Street in Laramie, Wyoming, 82072. The application has been submitted by BLT Development LLC. All applications, plans, and specifications relative to these matters are available for review at the City of Laramie Planning Office, 405 Grand Avenue, Laramie, Wyoming. Anyone wishing to be heard should be present at the City Council Chambers or via Zoom.
Thank you, City Clerk. Any members of the public wish to speak to this public hearing? Please come forward. You'll just need to give us your name.
Good evening. My name is Jason Tangeman. I live at 2021 Fox Court. I am objecting to the preliminary plat as currently proposed. I've submitted some written materials to council. I don't know if you've had the opportunity to look at them. They were somewhat lengthy, but I'll try to summarize to some degree. I believe that the exception that the city is relying upon in regards to not undergrounding the power lines only applies to non-residential lots. It's a legal opinion I have. I suggest you perhaps discuss, not all lawyers are right all the time, and I suggest you perhaps address that issue with your counsel also, but I do believe that undergrounding is required and the exception does not apply in this particular case. This is an issue I've kind of followed since 2009, early on. With Stagecoach, I noticed that the power lines were still up in the air, and I went and looked at the preliminary plat, and they were to be undergrounded. And I talked to Mr. Erickson, who was out there, and he said, "Oh, we're not burying those." And after some back and forth, the city attorney and the city planning office said, "Yeah, they have to be buried." And ultimately, the same developer, this is the same developer, agreed to bury the power lines. And what's interesting is they signed a contract to bury the power lines, meaning they had thought that the cost of burying the power lines was already baked into their project. And we came to a hearing in front of this council, and I think perhaps only a couple of you were here back then, but we came to a hearing, and there was a request for a variance by the developer, and the request for variance was denied, and the power lines were supposed to be buried, and they were not buried. And Mr. Hunt, who no longer is with the city, would not call me back. He wouldn't respond to my emails. And if I asked Mr. Teeny, he says, "I don't know why they weren't buried." But they weren't buried. But this is the same developer from 2009 and the same developer today. So, you know what to do. And people come to my office and they say, "I want to file a lawsuit." And I'm like, "Don't file a lawsuit. That's a terrible thing to do. You're going to hate that. It's expensive, and you may not be happy with the outcome." I try to follow my own advice. I'm like, okay, let's see what happens. Because it's further development. And there's this second, though your planning commission is telling you, well, that plat expired, and so we can do a new plat. I legally disagree with that. But there's a new plat that is offered, and there's a new cul-de-sac. And I timely objected to it, and there were 10 lots that were proposed. And the planning, and the planning, the city said, and you don't have to bury the power lines. You don't have to do that. And the plat went to the planning commission. The planning commission said, "What are you talking about? That's what the code says, bury the power lines." And so what happens is an amended plat is then submitted to the planning commission, where only 6 of the original 10 lots are going to be developed. And of the reason that's being done is because the 4 lots at the top of the cul-de-sac where the power lines run over, like, well, it doesn't matter, it doesn't apply, because it's not going to go over though. It's going to go over the lots that are no longer part of the plat. I think that's legal, that's nonsense to me, legal nonsense, but okay, because at the planning commission, Mr. Teeny told me and the planning commission that, look, let the developer develop these 6 lots, let them get some money together, then they can bury the power lines. Okay, that satisfies me, fair enough. And so I've been waiting. I've been waiting since 2016 to see what happens with those 4 lots at the top of the cul-de-sac. And I see now, well, we've amended the undergrounding requirement, and it's no longer required. And I would submit to you that this is an exception to the rule. Undergrounding of power lines is the standard. I hired experts back in 2009, 2010 to help me with that, to explain that 3-phase power is regularly buried. And in this case, the power lines should be buried. This is an exception. The council doesn't have to accept the exception necessarily. I think there's a lot of equity in my favor, frankly, to get those things buried. When we had that hearing way back in 2010 on the variance, Rocky Mountain Power walked in here and they said, "Look, we can bury those power lines." And my recollection is it was about $70,000. If I'm wrong, someone can call me out on that, but that's my recollection. But Rocky Mountain Power said that they would bury the power lines. They gave a cost for it. The developer agreed to it. The developer had it baked in. Power lines never have gotten buried. And so I would ask at this point to reject it. I'm not against the development. If I'm running out of time, I apologize.
You are, if you would.
I'm way out of time. And tell me to shut up. I used to sit in your chair. Thank you very much for your time and listening to me and tell me to.
Sure. No, you're just fine. And, by way of just a little info for you, you're welcome to speak during the item as well. I'd like to.
I won't bore you twice.
Not boring at all. That's what we're here for.
Thank you very
But
much.
thank you for taking time to be here. Any other members of the public wish to speak during this public hearing? Okay. Seeing none, we will close that public hearing. City Manager, go ahead with your announcement.
I'll just go. Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to introduce a new staff member to you this evening. Mr. Jay Smith, come on up here. Jay has started with the city just a week ago, right? A week and a day ago. Jay will be our new Natural Resources Program Administrator. I'll tell you a little bit about Jay, and then he can tell you more, I guess. But he comes to us with over a decade of experience working with a number of agencies of the state of Wyoming, from the State Engineer's Office to the Water Development Office. He will be assisting us with aquifer protection, with managing our surface water right in the Laramie River, and all things natural resource oriented. So we're really excited to have him on board. And with that, I'll let you introduce yourself and share other relevant facts.
Thank you, City Manager. Welcome.
Mayor, council, well, the city manager stole all my thunder. I don't have much else to tell you now. My name is Jay. I'm very excited to be a part of this team, and I can't wait to dive into all these issues. So thank you.
Well, welcome, Jay. The council really relies on your office for so much of what we do, so I'm really happy to have you on the team, and can't say welcome enough.
Thank you all very much.
City Manager, we'll move back to you for monthly staff recognitions.
Thank you. Mayor, I'm excited to be able to recognize Kevin Johnston tonight. Kevin is in our Facilities Maintenance Division, and he was nominated to be our Employee of the Month, or our rock star, as we like to say, by the Recreation Manager and by the Facilities Maintenance Manager jointly. And both of those two managers said that they really thought that Kevin brought a lot of expertise, particularly to the aquatic section of the Recreation Center, that he had extensive knowledge of the mechanical and chemical systems in our aquatics scheme, and so that is a very important and powerful skill set that he has. They also noted that in terms of his attitude, he really is the sort of person that steps up and leads by example, and so they were really pleased to nominate him to be recognized this month. Kevin is from Laramie and has a lot of experience in the trades as well as in carpentry and masonry, and has really just become an invaluable member of our team. So we are happy to celebrate him this evening, and I'm not sure if he's with us or not. No, he was not able to join us, but of course Kevin is our full-time benefited staff member, and we also have other staff members we'd like to recognize tonight. I told you a few months ago, I guess, Council, that we've started also recognizing the really invaluable group of employees who may not be permanent positions with the city, but tend to work with us in temporary positions that may span a summer or may span even longer than that, a year or two, but these are what we call our provisional or seasonal help. These folks are invaluable to our operation, and so we wanted to be able to recognize them as we do full-time permanent employees. So I know we have three folks that we recognize this month, and those folks are Kinley Jolly, Caitlin Sprague, and Bailey Sprague, and two of these ladies were able to join us tonight, as well as the senior staff member who nominated them, and that is Cynthia Stoffer. So I'm going to let Cynthia maybe come up and introduce your staff.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Welcome to all of you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor, City Council. I have with me tonight Bailey Sprague and Caitlin Sprague. They are two of my three lead staff and have been with me for 2 years with Bailey and 1 year with Caitlin, yeah. And these are the people that make me look good every single day. I mean, they show up, they oversee, each of them oversee 4 teachers that that are overseeing and having fun with 80 children every single day from 8 to 5 for 9 weeks this summer. And they just keep showing up with a smile on their face, and they do a fantastic job. And I nominated them specifically. I think what I said was that it happened to be the week that we were doing training for all of our staff. We have 13 people on board in the summertime. These two just literally wrapped their arms around the training this year and just full speed ahead. I hardly had to contribute at all. And they developed a PowerPoint presentation that was just amazing. And they really understand, like I said in the Kudos Corner comment, they really understand that a well-trained staff makes for a successful program. And it's obvious in the program we've got going this summer, for sure. So, did you girls want to say anything?
Thank you. So working with Cynthia Stoffers and 80 kids, just has brought me personally closer, and I don't know if I'm speaking on behalf of Bailey, to the community. I am not originally from Laramie, but driving around, I see parents, I see kids, everywhere I go, I see them. So, yeah, brought me closer to this community for sure. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Same thing that Caitlin said. Moving from Leadville, Colorado, this job has given me the opportunity to feel like I am a part of a community, and I constantly tell my parents how hard it would be for me to leave Laramie right now because I know so many people because of the position that I'm in. So thank you.
Well, that's really great. Congratulations to you all. And I'm sure the community building goes both ways. I'm sure the kids in your classes are feeling more welcome too, making friends and things of that sort. So thank you for what you do.
Thank you.
Council members, any disclosures any council members have with items on our agenda this evening? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to approval of the consent agenda. Vice Mayor.
Thank you. I move that the consent agenda be approved and that each specific action on the consent agenda be approved as indicated.
Second.
Motion by Vice Mayor Cumby, second by Councilor Pierce. City Clerk, you can call the roll.
Gabriel.
Yes.
Newman.
Yes.
O'Doherty.
Yes.
Pierce.
Yes.
Richardson.
Yes.
Shumway.
Yes.
Somerville. Absent. Cumby.
Yes.
Harrington.
Yes.
That's 8 yeses, 0 nos, and 1 absent, Your Honor.
Thank you, City Clerk. The consent agenda has been approved, and I just wanted to thank those members of the public that are now members of our URA board for attending the meeting this evening. All right, we will move on to our regular agenda. Councilor Richardson, item 11.
Thank you. I move that council awards the bid for a Type 1 ambulance to Braun Northwest, Inc. in the amount of $268,892 with listed option of $7,400 for total project cost of $276,292 and authorize the mayor and city clerk to sign.
Second.
Motion by Richardson, seconded by Gabriel. Chief Johnson, welcome.
Honorable Mayor, members of council, what's before you tonight is we're replacing our MS 145. It's in our fleet replacement plan, and it was actually carried one time when we expanded from 5 ambulances to 6 ambulances. It's a Type 3 ambulance. We're replacing it with a Type 1, which is important because of the ability to take it on any call during the winter type of deal. It has the 4-wheel drive, the bigger chassis. That being said, it's the ambulance that we're replacing has close to 290,000 miles on it, and the trade-in value is only being offered $1,500. I'm recommending that we hold on to it, decide what to do with it when we accept a new one. I believe council can leverage that ambulance with some other way to use it versus trading it in. I think we've gained good value in some of the program donation things we've done in the past. We always add that into any kind of grant we write, how we pay it forward, that kind of thing. One thing I did want to point out is the chassis we're used to getting is not offered anymore, so we're asking to do an upgrade to an equivalent chassis that we have listed, and that's that $7,400 option. The project is budgeted at $280,615, so we are still under budget. It's higher, it's on the higher end of what we typically spend for an ambulance, but if you remember, several years ago, we committed to a program where we're investing a little more into our boxes, and we are repurposing those boxes up to 3 times on re-chassis them, and that's where the savings comes over the long run for our service. I also wanted to talk about my spec committee. I have one of the individuals here tonight, and I'll introduce him, but they do a lot of work on these. They go through these in detail and work with the manufacturers involved with the bid, as with the fleet department. But our spec committee for this was Patrick Smayr, Mike Nyquist, and Chase Bridgman. Chase is the only one that could be here tonight, so I'd like to introduce him and bring him up for a couple of reasons. One is I'm very proud of the work they do, and so I get a chance to show him off. And two, if you have a specific question about the specs, he's probably better capable to answer the question than I am. So come on up, Chase.
Thank you, Chief. Welcome, Chase.
So this is Company Officer Chase Bridgman, and just want to introduce him.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm glad you brought.
Stand for questions. So.
Council members, any questions? You're going to get off easy, maybe, just like that.
Cross, sir.
Yeah. All right. Seeing no questions, you made it. Thank you. We'll go to any members of the public who wish to speak to this item. Go ahead and just raise your hand on Zoom or come forward if you are in the room. You'd have 3 minutes. Seeing no public comments, we will close public comment period. Council members, back to you for any comments before the vote. Seeing none, City Clerk, you can call the roll.
Richardson.
Yes.
Pierce.
Yes.
O'Doherty.
Yes.
Newman.
Yes.
Gabriel.
Yes.
Shumway.
Yes.
Somerville.
Yes.
Cumby.
Yes.
Harrington.
Yes.
That's 9 yeses and 0 noes, Your Honor.
Thank you, City Clerk. That item has been approved. We will move on to item 12. Vice Mayor Cumby.
I move to approve Stagecoach subdivision, second filing preliminary plat based on findings of fact and conclusions of law, and authorize the mayor and clerk to sign the plat.
Second.
Motion by Cumby, second by Richardson. Mr. Gowatuller, welcome.
Yes. Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of council. The preliminary plat that you have before you this evening, the Stagecoach subdivision second filing, is made up of 20 residential lots in the R1 zoning district, generally located right there northwest of the intersection of 22nd and Beaufort. The subdivision is going to consist of single-family homes. It is zoned R1, and it's going to be accessible off of Beaufort Street by one access point, one, and then there's going to be 2 local roads, Derringer Road and Outlaw Street, as well as the extension of Deadwood Court, that are going to be local roads within the subdivision. The lots there are going to be approximately between 5,600 square feet and 16,000 square feet in size. The subdivision will be served by city water and sewer. And then I'll speak a little bit just about the future land use and the surrounding zoning of the subdivision. It's located generally in an R1 area, right? I mean, the only exception is north of the subdivision where the Sierra Sky Office Park is, and that's actually the public trail system is directly adjacent to that. So current zoning, southeast and west is all R1, and then north you have that technology and office zoning district. The future land use is also consistent suburban residential for everything southeast and west, and then north is suburban commercial, but we don't really anticipate anything other than that trail taking up that parcel of land that's directly adjacent. There's several plans that support the platting of residential property in Laramie, specifically within the city without having to, go outside of where there's no infrastructure laid. So some of those plans are the comprehensive plan, the housing study and action plan for 2030, and then the Thrive Laramie Community and Economic Development Action Strategy plan. All of those, again, they encourage the platting of property or of land that is currently serviced by city infrastructure, A little bit more about, we did receive a few public comments on this, 3 recorded phone calls, and then we did have written comment from the same gentleman who gave public comment this evening. The 3 phone calls generally had to do with the drainage of how the subdivision, how drainage is going to work there. And, to speak to that a little bit, we, of course, receive, construction drawings, and Public Works helps us with this analysis of what the land is going to, how it's going to act, drainage-wise when it's fully developed. To speak to it a little bit, though, is that it's already accounted for, this subdivision is, in the North Laramie Drainage Master Plan that was completed in 2013. All the discharge from this subdivision is going to go to that detention pond located 22nd and Nighthawk. And again, increased flows were accounted for the impervious surface area that's going to be, established by these new homes and these new streets. To speak a little bit to Mr. Tangeman's comment regarding the undergrounding of power lines, he is correct that there are 2 exceptions to undergrounding power lines when it comes to, platting land. And the first one he is correct about. He is correct in the fact that he noted that that the 600-volt benchmark for anything above that being an exception is only for non-residential zone districts. However, the second exception in our code, 1516.40.j, states that electrical transmission lines that transmit electrical power from generation to substations are an exception as well. So transmission lines. So this is, with these exceptions, we went to Rocky Mountain Power in our review, and for one, yes, they're well over the 600-volt limit, but they are also considered transmission lines by them, making it a exception to having them be undergrounded. So that's what I'll say speaking to that point. He also brought up the comment about previous agreements that perhaps were made or agreed to with a preliminary plat that was actually approved. Now those do expire, and when a preliminary plat expires, it's a blank slate again. That property is unplatted, right? So it's the new codes are in place, and the code, this section regarding electrical transmission lines, was changed between that submission or that preliminary plat that was approved and this one that's before you this evening. I'll be glad to answer more about that during question and answer, but to speak a little bit more about the subdivision itself, I want to talk about utilities and drainage since we did receive public comment about that. But as far as parkland dedication for this goes, the city always has 2 options. They have the actual parkland dedication option or the park in lieu option, which is what staff recommended for this project, given that, we're close to the Sierra Sky Trail, Scout Park, and other amenities that kind of check that box. So any future final plat for each lot that is platted, they'll be required to pay a certain amount based on a calculation that we have in code for each lot that's developed. And that money goes into our park and rec, I believe our general fund, and those funds can only be used in the service areas where that subdivision is being developed. Yeah, and again, like any subdivision, during the final plat stage, it's going to need to go through the subdivision completion agreement, make sure all the utilities are established as presented and that we've reviewed. And I believe that concludes my presentation. Honorable Mayor, we also have a few members from Coffee Engineering here this evening. If you want to turn it over to them as well, but I'll stand for questions as well.
Thank you, Mr. Gabatuller. Yeah, Councilor Pierce, please.
Yeah, thank you. Can you read that second exception again?
Yes. I'll just read the whole part here. So concurrent with final platting, all new existing IT, so in parentheses, telecommunications, cable, TV, fiber, and similar, end parentheses, and electrical utilities within the final plat area and within rights of way adjacent to the final plat shall be undergrounded in streets, alleys, and easements in a manner approved by the city with the following exceptions. Do you only want me to read the second one about?
Just keep going.
Okay. So with the following exceptions. 1, existing pole-mounted primary greater than 600-volt electrical distribution lines, any existing IT attached or adjacent to these poles, and any existing secondary less than 600-volt electrical lines attached to these poles in non-residential zone districts. So that's the first exception. And 2, electrical transmission lines, WAPA and similar, that transmit electrical power from generation to substation.
Do you have a follow-up, Councilor Pierce?
Not yet.
Okay. Councilor Doherty.
What I heard was new IT, or whatever, new lines. That line's been there since 1980, at least. Well, when your house was built, that line was there. It's right behind Councilor Gabriel's house and mine. It goes over properties on Ames Court that have been there a long time. And then it goes to an empty lot on Falcon, and then I don't know how you would bury and then pop it back up. And what I'm hearing is that it's new lines need to be buried. So if a new line were put in there, didn't you say new?
No, it is new and existing.
Oh, okay, all right.
Yeah. But the second exception, again, would play a part here since it is considered a transmission line.
I went up there today with my engineer husband and saw that it's the transmission line to the WAPA station. So that's been there a long time, and it's right there in the neighborhood. So I'm not concerned about that. I am concerned that the drainage right now, I mean, the water is going down, but so is the mud. And so I feel like if these lots were developed, particularly if there's some landscaping, we might get less mud because most of the mud's coming from the undeveloped lots. So I look forward to the de-mudding of the neighborhood. So I'm hoping that, so I'll support this. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Doherty. Any other council members? Councilor Gabriel?
Thanks, Mayor. And maybe Mr. Coffey can address this, but I was just curious about what Mr. Tangeman was talking about in previous discussions where the developer was amenable to burying the transmission lines. And then, I guess in talking with some other people from your office, they weren't quite sure what happened to that. And now here we are again, and it hasn't been done. So maybe I can get that in with Mr. Coffey later, or can you comment on that?
From what I understand, and again, I'll echo, the fact that it was a preliminary plat that expired.
Okay.
So it's, it is the same developer, but the fact that it expired means that it's, any kind of agreement or anything is moot at that point, because we're entering into a new review, the codes have changed. There may be more to it that Mr. Coffey would like to address, but from our standpoint, that's all we can really look at is it expired, and we looked at it in a completely new light.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor?
I'm just curious about when a plat expires, is there a standard where after a period of time, it expires? Or how does that expiration occur?
Yeah, so the final plat, or the preliminary plat expires, I believe, in 2 years. So the way to keep that active is to file a final plat. And then, because this subdivision is only 20 lots, but say you had 200 lot subdivision, you final plat 200 lots, then you have to you preliminary plat 200 lots, and then you do it in phases where you final plat 100 at a time. And you have to keep that preliminary plat active by submitting a final plat within that 2 years, and that's how it remains active. And generally, all the lots become, they're final platted. So, but this does happen as well. So.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilor Richardson, please.
Thank you. So just to clarify, the reason it was approved this time but wasn't approved last time was because the code changed.
It was approved last time.
Oh, okay.
As well.
Okay, great. Thank you for that clarification.
Go ahead.
Wasn't it approved that they were to be buried? I mean, I recall, I think I was on council then. Yeah. And I recall a pretty lengthy discussion, and we agreed then that they were to be buried. Am I correct?
So I could speak to that. I have had conversations with Derek about that. And I think the thing to keep in mind is that when those discussions were had, this section of code was not applicable yet. So the exceptions were not applicable. So yes, they were required to underground the lines, but then for whatever reason, they didn't decide to final plat that approved development, and it became unplatted basically, and then we have this new set of exceptions here to undergrounding that play a part now that didn't then.
And I also recall conversations that some plats are grandfathered in and they don't expire. So explain to me how and why I would be remembering something like that.
Yeah, in our review procedures, we do have kind of the code that's applicable today, right? Where it's the 2 years and the 5 years for the final plat. I am not aware of any preliminary plats that are grandfathered and just remain active in perpetuity.
Please, City Manager, go ahead.
Mayor and Councilmember Pierce, I think you may be thinking of a plat that exists but was originally platted under the old code prior to the Unified Development Code being adopted. There you go. And it remains active in a sort of grandfathering status, but that's the only one. That is the only one, I believe, and it is now, 12 or 13 years old. This is a development up on North 45th-ish. Yeah, so that's the only grandfather plat I'm aware of, and that was the code change.
And we are working our way through a few, I thought, that still might be in that area, hanging out there.
Yes, they've had multiple filings and whatnot, so I think that's what you're thinking of, Councilor. Sorry.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, City Manager. Councilor Shumway.
The question I have is this. In this area, there are buried transmission lines in this area. I was on council when individuals came forward and Pacific Power agreed to bury, and they did. I don't know if there's any power lines that are not transmission lines, and I believe this entire area is substation is WAPA. So is what we're looking at here that the new guidelines are that they may or may not be buried, or that they shall not be buried?
The way, Councilmember Shumway, the way I read it is an exception, so it's not required. Any local lines are still required to be undergrounded, right? So anything, going into, down the local roads or anything servicing the houses, those will be undergrounded. But this existing line, anything that's considered, that is a transmission line, is not required by code. So it's definitely not a shall not, but it's definitely something that's up to the developer. And we as city staff can't hold them to that with this exception. We can't use code to make them underground power lines.
Thank you. Councilor Richardson, did you have a question?
Actually, that kind of helped answer mine.
Okay. Councilor Doherty, please.
I was wondering if we could hear from Mr. Coffey if he had something to add. And I have a question that might be an engineering question, like how deep are those power lines have to be buried? It's a very erosive hill. I mean, our recently buried cable lines or optical lines are now on the surface. I know these would be deeper. How deep do they go? Thanks.
And would you mind just giving us your name for the record?
Sure, I'm Dave Coffey, Coffey Engineering. With me is Jared Ralph, the project engineer for this project, Honorable Mayor, Councilor. Rocky Mountain Power determines how deep those get buried. Yeah. And as far as the erosion is concerned, I think your initial assumption regarding how the development will help protect soil erosion is accurate. Once the streets are in, the streets will channel the water on an impervious surface, and the city's code requirements for landscaping will do a tremendous job of keeping silt off the streets. So I'm not particularly concerned about it, especially once everything finally gets built and restored with landscaping. It'll be nice. Do you have anything to add, Jared?
That's perfect. Okay. Thank you. Council members, any other questions? Mr. Gavatuller, I have a question for you. So we're talking specifically about the lines. So I went and looked today. There's lines on 22nd and lines sort of on the ridge line, right? And so what new lines are we talking about that would be constructed and have to be buried? Can you just maybe orient me a little bit on which, because it wouldn't be the service lines from poles to the house. Those would be buried, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So we're talking about along a street, or right? So which lines
so the subdivision, I mean, and I don't know if there will be any, or whether they'll all be able to be served directly from the existing line. However, I mean, they're not going to. What you see is what's going to be there. There's not.
Thank you. That's good enough.
Yeah.
Councilor Pierce.
But won't there be more if there's houses? I mean, you have to get.
Yeah, those are under 600.
So those get buried.
So those are considered. Okay. I don't know the exact term, but low service lines. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Council members, any other questions before we go to the public? Okay. We'll go to the public. Council, you'll have another shot. Thank you, Mr. Gavatuller. Thank you, Mr. Coffey. Any members of the public wish to speak to this preliminary plat? If you do, please raise your hands on Zoom or come forward in the room. Seeing none, we'll close the public comment period. Council, back to you for any comments before the vote. Please, Councilor Doherty.
So I think there's transmission lines and there's service lines. And right now, the transmission line would remain where it is now. What you saw right along the ridge, like in the alley behind my house and going along the ridge to the east, or just downhill of the ridge. And right now there are service lines to the streetlights on 22nd, on Beaufort, so it would be a similar kind of thing. They come down from there, they go underground and go to the houses. So what I'm hearing is this wouldn't change the line that's there now, but every new thing goes down underground. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor. Any other comments, Council? Okay. Before we go to the vote, I would just say that the council has taken quite a bit of action to speed up and maybe increase flexibility in building housing in our community, and this housing in particular is, my own personal take would be more density would be great, but that is not my choice to make. We have opened the door for those opportunities to be had by developers, and I would like to see some of them start using them, but I think from all of the exceptions that we've asked or all the sort of things that we've asked the community to deal with to begin addressing this feels like not a significant thing to deal with to start seeing some houses be built, and in particular, given the plenty build on the hill, these houses will be immediately adjacent to that, and I think would be they increase the sort of walkability for folks that would want to walk to their work. If you think of the demographic of folks, this is a needed thing for our community in a well-placed neighborhood. So I'm certainly going to support this plat, and I appreciate the developer for bringing it forward. And I think there's no reason to expect that if we were to say, deny this, that maybe this would just not be built, and then another 2 years from now, it may come back as a new preliminary plat when there's different folks sitting in these chairs. So, Council, with that, I think we'll go to the vote. City Clerk.
Somerville.
Yes.
Shumway.
Yes.
Richardson.
Yes.
Pierce.
Yes.
O'Doherty.
Yes.
Newman.
Yes.
Gabriel.
Yes.
Cumby.
Yes.
Harrington.
Yes.
That's 9 yeses and 0 noes, Your Honor.
Thank you, City Clerk. That item has been approved. We'll move on to item 13. Councilor Gabriel.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that the Laramie City Council award the bid for the Laramie Community Recreation Center Indoor Leisure Pool Improvement Project Phase 1. Reduced scope in the amount of $433,500. Authorize a budget amendment in an amount of $264,870.90 to cover the increased project cost, contingency, and the additional improvements associated with the project, and authorize the city manager, mayor, and clerk to sign.
Second.
Motion by Gabriel, second by Pierce. Who do we have with this item? I see that City Manager Jordan is in the Zoom room with her hand up. Is that you, or could that potentially be?
I believe that is the assistant
I thought
city
that may be the
manager.
case. Very sneaky assistant city manager. Welcome, Todd. Thank you.
Honorable Mayor, City Council, thanks for having me in tonight. We're saving the city money by keeping just one Zoom account, so that's the way we're getting ahead.
The public appreciates it.
Honorable Mayor, City Council, we've been working on improvements to the recreation center that's now starting to get close to 20 years old. The life expectancy of a pool plaster project when it's not well maintained is roughly about 10 years. We've been able to get all this time with expert staff and maintenance of the pool chemistry, plus patching on an annual basis. But we finally reached the point where we have no option but to improve the pool shell and to help prevent it from enduring leaks and having tile come loose and some other issues. Along with this project, we're also installing a new play feature, which we have already purchased through a cooperative bidding process to update the indoor leisure pool, which is by far one of our #1 improvements. A few other things going along with this, we're also developing a fence project that separates the leisure pool from the lap pool, which is by the state pool code, a permanent fence that will be permanently electrically grounded for safety and will be installed along with this project. So unfortunately, with all the cost increases we've seen, we've had quite a significant increase in expense, and we're requesting a $264,870.90 budget amendment along with this to come from the specific purpose tax ballot to help us get this project going. When we do this project, it looks like we may have the indoor leisure pool closed for upwards of 4 weeks, but we should be able to get open quickly and extend our lap swimming hours at that point also. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Assistant City Manager. Council members, do you have any questions about this item? Assistant City Manager, as this project goes along, is there any portion of this that would be towards heating the water more efficiently in the showers? As somebody who takes a toddler that takes cold showers, I can see folks might appreciate that.
Honorable Mayor, we do actually have a engineered design improvement for the shower heating that will create a closer recirc to the shower valves, which we have found to be part of our problem. Recently replaced some mixing valves and some other pieces that seem to have controlled the problem minimally, but we are continuing to see issues on a large heating system that's really quite difficult to maintain and keep efficient.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? Yeah, they sure can be. All right, we'll go to the public on this item. Any member of the public wishing to speak to the council on this item, please go ahead and raise your hand on Zoom or come forward in the room. Seeing none, we will close the public comment period. Council, back to you for any comments. Okay, City Clerk, you can call the roll.
Gabriel.
Yes.
Newman.
Yes.
O'Doherty.
Yes.
Pierce.
Yes.
Richardson.
Yes.
Shumway.
Yes.
Somerville.
Yes.
Cumby.
Yes.
Harrington.
Yes.
That's 9 yeses and 0 noes, Your Honor.
Thank you, City Clerk. That item has been approved. We will move on to item 14, Councilor Pierce.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. I move to approve Resolution 2023-52, authorizing one full-time equivalent position with fire EMS, and authorize the mayor and city clerk to sign.
Second.
Motion by Pierce, second by O'Doherty. Chief, welcome back.
Honorable Mayor, members of council, a little quick background on this item. Last year, we initiated and launched a civilian paramedic pilot program with a block amount of funds that was approved by council at $200,000. Moving into budget this year, we moved that budget to $213,000 just based on cost of living issues. We have several things in the works in the EMS division that affect the revenue coming in. One is we established an agreement with the county that pays for service. That agreement has grown and added some revenue into the general fund. We also have applied and been verbally awarded. I still do not have the grant agreement back from the AG's office, but I've been told it's pending and I'll get it. But it's a $600,000 grant with $600,000 match. $430,000 of that are for wages. And then we are in the middle of a renegotiation effort with IMH Hospital on our lease agreement with our personnel and equipment to IMH. So those are the things that are the fiscal outlook looking forward. Both the city manager and I are recommending taking one of our part-time positions in that existing program and upgrading it to the full-time position that the resolution describes for you tonight. Let's see if there's anything else. I believe that's what I had to say, and if you have any, I'll stand for questions.
Thank you, Chief Johnson. Council members, any questions? Okay. Thank you, Chief. Okay. We'll go to the public on this item. Members of the public who wish to speak to this item can raise their hand on Zoom or come forward if you're in the room. Seeing none, I will close the public comment period and back to the council for any comments before the vote. City Clerk, you can call the roll.
Pierce.
Yes.
Richardson.
Yes.
Shumway.
Yes.
Somerville.
Yes.
O'Doherty.
Yes.
Newman.
Yes.
Gabriel.
Yes.
Cumby.
Yes.
Harrington.
Yes.
That's 9 yeses and 0 nos, Your Honor.
Thank you, City Clerk. That item has been approved. We'll move on to item 15. Councilor O'Doherty.
I move to approve Resolution 2023-53, accepting and approving the findings of the complete and final Level 2 Dallin Diversion Rehabilitation and Fish Passage Study, and authorize the mayor and clerk to sign the resolution.
Second.
Motion by O'Doherty, second by Pierce. City Manager, please.
Thank you, Council. The Dallin diversion structure, as you know, is nearing its useful life. It's in very poor condition. We've been working for a number of years to start the process to update the Dallin diversion structure on the Laramie River. Right now, a bunch of our slide gates are leaking. They're really difficult to operate. Concrete around that structure is poor, basically failing, specifically on the intake structure. So we've been engaged in this effort to make it more functional, but also to make it more safe for our staff to operate. We have been in a partnership with Wyoming Water Development Commission and have moved through level 2 of their 3-level process of getting to construction funding. You were fortunate to be able to review the level 2 study results in late June. We had our consultant in WWC to present the findings along with representatives of the Water Development Commission. So we also, since you received that report on June 13th, sorry, I'm losing my train of thought, we also have conducted the Water Development Commission's hearing that is required under statute. That's a public hearing. It was held last week. We had a couple of citizens attend with some really great questions, and they received, Council, basically the same presentation of the level 2 study and findings that you received. In all, the public comments that were received during the Water Development Commission's public comment period, there were no significant comments against the project and nothing that changed the level 2 study from what you have last seen. And so the next step in the process is that the council or the governing body needs to accept and approve the findings of level 2, and that will give us the staff level the green light to prepare a level 3 grant application, which would bring design and construction funding with the possibility of being under construction late next year, if that is your will. So anyway, that's what this resolution is about, simply to accept and approve the findings of the level 2 study.
Thank you, City Manager.
If you have any other questions, happy to answer.
Sure, appreciate it. Thank you. Any other questions, Council? Do you have yeah, please,
I
Council.
have a question. Can we go to comments?
Yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
This is an amazing project, and it's thrilling. And the dam is in really bad shape. I mean, really bad shape. So it needs help, and will help fish too, which is good.
All right, we will go to the public and come back for comments if you guys are all right. Sorry, I thought that's where we were headed. Councilor Pierce, no problem either way. Any members of the public wish to speak to the council on this item? Go ahead and come forward or raise your hand on Zoom. Seeing none, we will close the public comment period to Councilor O'Doherty, then Councilor Gabriel.
I just have to chime in because when I first came to Laramie, it was to work in the Forestry Sciences Laboratory. One of my colleagues, Mike Young, found out that trout migrate a lot farther than we used to think, and wrote a paper called Paradigm Lost. And so this seems very appropriate for us to update this to the 21st century, allow fish passage, and also invertebrates. So I'm very happy to support this. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilor Gabriel, please.
Oh, thanks, Mayor. Several years ago, Councilor O'Doherty and then Councilor Schuster and I had the opportunity to go out with Darren Parkin on a tour. And at that particular time, it was really in bad shape. And that was a couple of years ago. And Darren talked about what needed to be done. So all this takes a long time. And so I'm so happy to see this come before council.
Thank you, Councilor Gabriel. Any other comments, Councilor Pierce? Go ahead.
No, I was out there this spring, and like, whoa. You didn't know if the dam was going to go or what was going to happen. So yeah.
Great. All right, council members, any other comments before the vote? City Clerk, you can call the roll.
O'Doherty.
Yes.
Newman.
Yes.
Richardson.
Yes.
Somerville.
Yes.
Shumway.
Yes.
Pierce.
Yes.
Gabriel.
Yes.
Cumby.
Yes.
Harrington.
Yes.
That's 9 yeses and 0 nos, Your Honor.
Thank you, City Clerk. That item has been approved. We will move on to item 16. Counselor Richardson.
Thank you. I move to approve Resolution 2023-50, adopting the bylaws for the Laramie Police Advisory Board in accordance with Laramie Municipal Code 2.60, and authorize the mayor and clerk to sign.
Second.
Motion by Richardson, second by Gabriel. Chief Brown, welcome.
Honorable Mayor, council members, I apologize in advance. I intended to have the bylaws approved on the third reading of the ordinance, but I didn't add that portion in there, so new chief issues, I guess. I think Mr. Montoya was right last week when he was trying to speak about the bylaws. We probably should have added it in there. However, I'll speak to it tonight. The bylaws have been on the last three, the first, second, and third readings. They've been attachments. The community hasn't had opportunities to speak on the bylaws, and I've received numerous phone calls on them, numerous phone calls from community members who are interested in participating. The one question that I have had from different individuals is reference to the training. I can tell you by and large, the community members I've had an opportunity to interact with, including several last night, are excited about participating in the training. And we're also looking at having a Citizens Academy in coordination with this to invite all of our citizens to attend the same training, even if they're not selected for the board, starting in October. So at this point, I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Chief. And just for clarity, I had asked that the bylaws come. So you didn't do anything wrong. This is all on me that they came separately. Right. So I wanted to give council members a chance to spend time specifically with those. So council members, any questions for the chief on the bylaws? It may have been for nothing, Chief. Okay, we're going to move to members of the public on the bylaws. If there's any member of the public wishing to speak to this item, go ahead and raise your hands on Zoom or come forward if you're in the room. Seeing none, we will close the public comment period and back to the council for any comments before the vote. Please, Councilor Richardson.
I just have one question on one of the bylaws. So Article 4, responsibilities. Number 3, and this is just a consistency piece. So at the top it says use of force, review use of force incidents, but then you go to C, it talks about evaluating. And so I'm not sure if there needs to be a clarification. I don't know if I'm getting too in the weeds here, but if there needs to be a clarification because it makes it sound as though will they be evaluating kind of these use of force things, or will they just be reviewing? I mean, I guess that, to me, those two things seem kind of different, and they're in the same area.
Chief, please. And Councilor Somerville, I do see your hand. I'll come right to you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so what we're asking the board to do is to evaluate the law and department policy that's consistent and kind of explains the reason for the use of force in any given situation. So our intent is to present the use of force scenario, hypothetically a taser deployment, use of our ASP, use of a beanbag, the associated video that we have with it, answer any questions they have, and then ask that board to evaluate the department policies, training, procedures, and applicable state and federal law in accordance with it.
Thank you, Chief. Councilor Somerville?
Thank you, Mayor. Section C3 regarding the background investigations. I know we had a little discussion a couple of meetings, or I guess a couple of readings ago, regarding whether we should do that or not. And I don't know that I have a question regarding it. Maybe it's more of a comment to see if any council members feel similarly, but I feel a little strange picking on this one board to require applicants to obtain background check information to be placed on the board. I feel like it should be a citywide policy for city boards, if that's something that we would like to start doing rather than including it in the bylaws on one specific board. So I guess, Mayor, I'm wondering if anybody else has any thoughts on maybe removing that line from these bylaws and then bringing forward something that would put that in place for all of the city boards.
Thank you, council member. Any other council members have thoughts on that piece? Chief, if you have something on this item, you're welcome to share, but you're welcome to let the council hash it out for a minute as well. Okay. Council members, any thoughts on requiring background checks specifically for this board? Or should we require background checks for all our boards? This gets us into the weeds a little bit, but I think it's a good time for the conversation and exactly why we held this off. Councilor O'Doherty and then Councilor Pierce.
I guess I'm not wild about background checks, but I feel like since this is dealing with law enforcement, this would be the one place that it makes sense to me compared to the Disability Council, for example. So I don't have a problem with it, really.
Councilor Pierce?
Yeah, I don't necessarily have a problem with it. I mean, I know for many employment purposes outside of law enforcement, you have to go through a background check. Years ago, when I was working in a school, had to have a background check. UW, background check. I mean, I don't seem to think that this would be any different, and especially in this particular case compared to our other boards and commissions, it kind of makes some sense to me. I mean, I really haven't thought about it much beyond what I'm saying right now, but I'm okay with it.
Thank you, Councilor Pierce. Vice Mayor, and then Councilor Richardson.
I have a couple of questions. First of all, I'm wondering, can you just state the rationale for including that?
Sure.
I'd like to kind of hear that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we require background checks for anybody entering police facilities, mostly because of NCIC standards or national standards. But we also require background checks for individuals who volunteer at the rec center through youth events. Most of our employees, all of our employees who frequent the police department, whether it's a maintenance or facilities employee, police department employee, anybody in records, including or that frequents dispatcher records, including our human resource specialists.
Okay.
Thank you. And then my second, as a licensed nurse, I have to go through background checks, and depending on the state, they can be a little costly. And so would the members be required to pay for the background check, the fingerprinting, et cetera, that, and do you, no? I saw city manager.
No.
They
Resounding
would not.
no.
Okay, thank you. Those were my questions.
Councilor Richardson.
Councilor Cumbie had me.
Okay.
Same question.
Councilor Gabriel, then back to you, Councilor Somerville.
And Chief, if you wouldn't mind, I was just curious, you mentioned about inviting the public as well to some of these training sessions. And so that just brought a question to my mind about having the public that wouldn't be part of this board. How would that process work?
Sure. Through you, Mr. Mayor. So our intent is to have a Citizens Academy. Cheyenne has one. Several police departments throughout the nation have one. And what it does is it gives us the opportunity to provide that same level of training that really our officers have to an extent, but also extended to the Police Advisory Board and then members of the community. We want to educate as many people as we can. This board gives us the opportunity to meet with this group and provide them with additional details and information, and they're committed to an ongoing experience with our police department, whether it's 1, 2, or 3 years, depending on the term. But it also gives our community members the opportunity to interact with our police officers and the ones who desire to do so to get an idea of exactly what we're doing and what we're training our police to do.
And the situation with the background check for those individuals?
For the Citizens Academy, that's a good question. We haven't completed that requirement yet, or that process. Hopefully forthcoming. And to be honest with you, I haven't gone that far down. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Gabriel. Councilor Shumway, did you have a question? She's already had her first shot, so it's to you, and then we'll come to her after.
Chief, just a question about the Citizens Academy. And you also mentioned we don't know whether the advisory committee will be in for 1, 2, or 3 years. This 40 hours, I'm sure, will be, very beneficial. And I don't know if there's going to be any certification, any testing, or whatever. If they complete a 3-year term or a 2-year term, do they have to be retrained? Is there recertification? Is there, if a person has completed the testing, is there annual things to bring them up to speed with this academy? And then how much, and I know there's a lot of questions here, but the final question I have is, how much staff time is this Citizens Academy going to take? Sure. And how many officers will be involved?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Shermanway, the bylaws state that they will be required to attend approximately 20 to 30 hours of training. There is some wiggle room in there as to when it's going to be completed and with city manager approval to extend that training block. And then they're requested to do an additional 30 hours training every year. There's no testing requirement. The only requirement is that they attend the training. And then as far as manpower hours, our community policing sergeant, who will be in that role with a few community policing officers, hopefully shortly, once we finish some training, it will be part of their duties to put on the training for the community. So it's difficult to say the manpower hours without looking at the exact curriculum once he has it completed. I would estimate that for them, you're probably looking at 40 to 80 hours of time to prepare and train. But I think we get more bang for our buck by having other citizens in the community do it instead of just our 5 board members. Ideally, we like to have as many citizens as possible, but even if we max out the first class at 20 to 30 citizens, you have 2 to 3 officers training 20 to 30 members of the community, building relationships with the members of the community, which has been consistent with our community policing efforts.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Counselor. Any other for the first time? Okay, Counselor Somerville, to you, and then to you, Counselor Richardson.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question and I think then a comment. This would be for the city attorney or the chief. Do we have the ability to keep background investigation results or background check, sorry, not investigation, background check results confidential and safe from freedom of information requests because they are not city employees?
Yeah, please, City Attorney.
I don't think so, Mayor and Council. Background checks, there's various ways, perhaps, to make them employment records when you're hiring someone, perhaps. But we're not hiring these folks. They're not employees. So I believe that in all likelihood, the results of these background checks are public documents.
Thank you, City Attorney.
So, Mayor, with that response, that certainly is a cause for concern. I really see both sides. I'm personally a huge fan of background checks. I always believe more information is helpful, but certainly don't really want to make that information available to the world because we're a government agency. That's not fair to our board volunteers at all. It is hard enough to recruit volunteers for our boards, let alone having to disclose to somebody that we need you to do this and the newspaper can request this information and it could be published on the front page of the newspaper. That is a huge cause for concern. But Mayor, I want to share both sides of this a little bit. Maybe the city needs to spend more time considering whether we want any type of background checks for not just this board, but any board. I certainly see the value in background checks for a number of our boards. Our Parks and Rec board is working on children's program and they go to events and they should probably have background checks. Our Disabilities Commission work with some of our most vulnerable population. They should absolutely have background checks. There are, talking about the Monolith Ranch and the very important infrastructure that's out there. While that's maybe not a criminal concern, it certainly is a security concern. So I certainly see a lot of pressing reasons to have them, but at the same time, I guess I am concerned that we're picking on one board in particular, and that this board, by saying we're going to have background checks, we're going to discourage those that might have experience to apply. And, you know, just I'd ask the council to pause and think for a second. There are probably some past elected officials that would have something come back on a background check. And so we need to be fair, and we need to encourage people that maybe have lived on that side of the law, that have had an experience, to be willing to come forward and serve. Otherwise, we're doing the community a disservice by not getting all points of view. I think that's certainly a concern. I don't feel like this conversation is quite fleshed out well enough to go ahead and throw it in the bylaws and move forward. While I understand the hesitancy about taking somebody at their word, right? You're basically asking for honest admissions. You could ask the question on an application and hope that somebody would report it. I understand that's not the best, but I don't think we're quite there in the conversation about going ahead and making this a city policy. So I guess, Mayor, I'd stand for any other, or like if there's last space for any other comments, and then I have a motion.
Thank you, Councilor Somerville. Councilor Richardson, please.
I appreciate your comments, Councilor Somerville, and I think there's a lot to be thought about with that, and just I would like to explore that a little bit more, I think, as well. Kind of along that personal information stream of thought, I don't believe that I saw anywhere in here. One thing that continued to come up, it seems like in our comments, that people were very concerned that police personnel information would be released, which we know it won't. However, I wonder if it's worth adding some place within this document that personnel information will not be released, so that it is reiterated. And maybe I missed it, but just as a kind of a double kind of assurance for folks that is not our role. We do not know that information. We do not release that information, that sort of thing.
Thank you, Councilor Richardson. Councilor Newman.
I just wanted to say, for some reason, council got super quiet, and it's really hard to hear online now. I thought it was on my side, but it's not.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Newman. Council members, speak into your microphones a little better, maybe. Councilor Newman, can you hear me okay?
It's still kind of muffled, and it just started, which is weird.
Oh, strange.
And it is.
The Vice Mayor is listening to the meeting right now on Zoom, and she agrees with you.
Yep. It's like you're way off.
Huh. Any ideas, City Clerk? I have no ideas. Or maybe our broadcast folks have some genius idea.
Go check with IT or the broadcast.
Council, we're going to, before we come back to you, Councilor Somerville, we're going to take a quick recess for maybe 5 minutes to sort this out. So everybody come on back at 7:57. All right, everyone, welcome back. Thank you for giving us a minute with tech support there. Councilor Newman, did you have something to add here? Okay.
So I did. Councilor Richardson said something before I interrupted, and I have no idea what she said. If she could say that again.
Thank you, Councilor Newman. Do you want to restate it?
Sure. Basically, Brandon, I was saying that, in the public comment period, there were a lot of concerns about personnel files being shared, and we know that will not be the case. However, it might be nice to include something very specific in this document to reiterate it and reassure the public of that point.
Thank you, Councilor.
Thank you.
Councilor, do you have another point to make, Councilor Pierce, before we go to Councilor Somerville for a motion?
In regards to Councilor Richardson's comment, to me it was very clear that that's not an option, but I've been hearing it for a while too.
Sure.
So.
And Councilor Pierce, to that point, I had the consideration that after you said we had a minute to think afterwards, which I think was helpful for me. But if we put it in there, it may infer the fact that the board itself could then change that rule, given that they have the power to do that. Council would have to approve it, but it sets up a bit of a moment with running headfirst into state statute, I suppose. It would empower this board to some extent to challenge state statute in a way that I'm not sure I'm favorable to. So I would be favorable to not including that. It's all the same. Councilor Somerville, we're going to go to you for a motion.
Thank you, Mayor. Just given the previous discussion, and hoping we could take just a little bit more time with this policy, I move to amend the bylaws by removing item C3 related to background checks.
And Councilor Somerville, but before we go to a second, just to be sure I'm clear, you're talking about Article 6, C3, correct?
Yes, Mayor, that's correct.
Thank you. Is there a second? Council members, any second? Okay. Councilor Somerville, there is not a sufficient second. We are back to the main. Councilor Somerville, please.
Thank you, Mayor. A question for city staff then, as these background checks will be disclosed, can be publicly disclosed to anybody that requests it. Are we intending to put a warning so candidates are fully warned before they submit their applications? Because it will happen.
Mayor, through you, Councilor Somerville, we can certainly include a notification like that, much like we do at the bottom of our emails that says these could be considered public records. We can also consider how the application process is structured in that perhaps, and I haven't given the city attorney time to research this, but it occurs to me that should the applicant provide their own background check and criminal history check, and the city never takes possession of that record, it's just a reviewable item, I don't know if that would allow those folks to allow our staff to review it in camera, so to speak, or is that's the court term? And then they would maintain control of that document so that it was never a city document. So I don't know if that would work under statute, but I can see possibly a strategy for how we receive those applications and vet them that allows the individual to keep that private, and particularly if they are not selected for the board, right? So anyway, let me talk with the city attorney about that some more. I certainly hear the concerns of councilors. I understand why that might dissuade residents, but I would also remind council, while it typically, it sounds punitive to require a background check or a criminal history check, in this case, the reason we need that is to meet the intent in the ordinance that says we will make seats on this board available to formerly incarcerated individuals. So we're actually using it as a vetting process to understand who you will be able to appoint that can fulfill that category of board member.
City manager, can you point me to that specific language in the bylaws themselves? I was trying to find that again, and I didn't see those in the bylaws, the sort of like specific roles that
Yes.
aren't
and Mayor-
required but should be considered?
Yes, and Mayor, it's not in the bylaws, it's in your ordinance that you've adopted on third reading a couple weeks ago, and it is in section 2.60.010. It says, for Albany County residents appointed by city council. It goes on, blah, 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 and then it says, city council shall strive to appoint board members who reflect a diversity of the community, including but not limited to age, ancestry, color, disability, education, ethnicity, gender, geography, marital status, military status, national origin, race, religion, sex, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, and board members may include formerly incarcerated individuals and those from underserved or otherwise disadvantaged groups. That was a long sentence.
Thank you. Councilor Richardson, then Councilor Pierce.
I certainly don't want to remove that portion altogether, but I also would like to give more attention to it, to come up with some sort of a solution if it's possible, so that these folks aren't sharing that information. I think they're more apt to share that they have this sort of a record than to have a background check that will expose it, I guess. So I don't know if that means postponing this vote. I hate to postpone this because I know this is important and we want to get these bylaws passed. However, this, and I also know that the background check is important for the role and the amount of time that they will be spending in the police department. But I would love to see a little more exploration about how we can figure this out.
Thank you, Councilor Chief Brown, please.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I would also like to add, every jurisdiction that I'm familiar with across the nation, conviction records are public records, unless there's something I'm not familiar with. So it's not just us going into a secret database and pulling background records. It's something that's open to the public, in most internet searches that have background investigative components to it. That information is also available to every member of the public, including the council, media, through other avenues.
Chief, would there be other things in a background check beyond conviction record?
Not this background check. So we would be looking for a criminal history, not a comprehensive like we're doing for police officers when we're hiring them, going and talking to their neighbors and employers and doing a polygraph and psychological exam.
Thank you. Councilor Pierce and then Councilor O'Doherty. Councilor Somerville, you'll be after that.
So I guess how I just understood things, and maybe I've missed it, is whatever we do is public record anyway? Is that what I just heard?
Okay.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe so, and the city manager can confirm, or I'm sorry, the city attorney, but every jurisdiction that I've worked for that I'm familiar with, all those are public records, court documents.
Well, then we're good. Yeah. Right?
Councilor O'Doherty?
I was just wondering if we can limit the scope of the background check, because I really don't, I don't want it to be any more invasive than it already is. And how would that be controlled with these bylaws? Could we, yeah, that's my question.
And Councilor O'Doherty, I have a similar question to that. I think we need some sort of sideboard for folks that are applying to be able to understand more clearly what is being, what they're signing up for, right? Like what they're willing to put as a public record. They know their conviction record is certainly public already, right? But they don't know what else could be searched, right? City manager, please, go ahead.
Mayor, it would certainly be on the application and disclosed what exactly is going to be pulled, and that's stated in the bylaws in that section 3. It says, police chief shall obtain a criminal history for applicants, including convictions for violations of federal, state, or local law. So, we would disclose that on the application, but that is how the bylaws are limited at this point in time, at least.
Thank you, City Manager. Councilor O'Doherty, please.
But the sentence before that is candidates for appointed membership on board will be subject to background checks. So that's more vague. If you're saying the background checks is the next sentence, then why do we need the first sentence? Maybe that's a compromise.
Maybe we just get rid of the first.
Well, and I would wonder as well, Councilor, in by way of furthering this conversation, I think I'm trying to figure out sorry, I should have thought this through a little better, but I feel like the wording when the city manager read it was including, but it doesn't say it is limited to, right? So like there should be some, what I'm hearing is that is what some of the council members, at least, I have no idea if it's a majority or not at this point, but that to me feels like the heart of this conversation is, are we limiting it to that? Sure, city attorney.
I was just speaking with city manager, and it's a point well taken. We could simply entertain a motion to strike that first sentence. Because what we were trying to say, what's going to happen, is in the second sentence.
Thank you, city attorney. Councilor Somerville? Sorry, and then back to you.
Thank you, Mayor. So if we're looking at modifying this to put some sideboards on it, the police chief shall obtain a criminal history. In my professional experience as a federal background investigator, if I walked into the Laramie Police Department and I obtained a criminal history, it's going to have every single contact the police have had on there, not convictions. It has, was somebody called to the house for a noise complaint? Did somebody have a domestic dispute? Every single contact that the police have had with that individual, whether they are the complainant or the defendant, will be on that contact list. And I would also encourage the council to go to think just a step further. While criminal conviction histories are public record, you can walk into a municipal, a circuit, or a district court and get those. What we're doing is making this incredibly easy to access for the public. So instead of having to go do research and legwork, they can just do a FOIA request with the city of Laramie and get NCIC results with the conviction histories that might have occurred in different states across the country. We're consolidating all of this information, and this board is going to be heavily scrutinized. So if we're going to build sideboards on it, it should be very specific. We should not be pulling a criminal history. We should use more specific language so that the background checks don't end up with a laundry list of everything that's happened in that person's life that they might have had contact with law enforcement for. And while I understand that the conviction piece is the piece that might be given to the council members that are doing the interview and might be given to city staff, we've still produced a document. And I don't think that it's reasonable to ask somebody to do their own background check because, number one, they have to pay for it. And I think that that's going to create more problems with our applicant pool. So along with removing maybe that first sentence, I think we need to have a more specific second sentence that basically says it's going to be related to, the only document we're going to produce is related to actual criminal convictions. And then the council also needs to realize the limitations of a system like NCIC, where many localities do not put that information on NCIC. So I just want the council to understand all of that. And my experience as a federal investigator, there's no limiting that list when you walk in and ask for a criminal history or have a department do a criminal history. So maybe we need to take a minute and confer with the city attorney and come up with language that puts sideboards on that for specifically some pathway to just creating a conviction list, as long as the council is okay with making that super easy for somebody to put on the front page of the newspaper.
Thank you, Councilor Somerville. Councilor Shumway, I had you next, and then Councilor Pierce.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay.
First of all, I want to remind the council that this is a resolution. We just have one shot at it. If we say no because we have a disagreement on any of the language, it's going to be very difficult to make this go forward. As far as background checks, I recall having one for myself because we were in foster care, and so it was required for them to do a background check, and I thought, this will be easy and this will be fast. They won't find anything. Well, when they came back, they had 3.5 pages of stuff, and I thought, holy cow. And it was everything from, every foster kid runaway, everything that we ever had happen in 20 or 30 years. And I would think, if someone wanted to make me look bad, they'd say, do you want to see Joe Shumway's background check? Look at this. That's what kind of a guy you have on the city council. And there's nothing there that I'm ashamed of. It's just that, there's a lot of information that every phone call that goes in, when your kids call and say, that, or that anything that happens is on that police report. And so it can be something that some people would be very concerned about. I'm not concerned about what's on my background check, but I can tell you this, when I first did that, I didn't think there would be anything on it. And it's long, and it's very, very complete.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Pierce, did you have anything? Okay.
No.
Council members, any other questions or comments? We are currently, Councilor Richardson.
Sorry, just kind of going back to this again, this number 3. As we're looking at this, it talks about the police chief doing this and then reporting or advising the board and council. Is there some way that information that does not need to be shared with council can stay, or could council, after having decided they want XYZ people on this board, then see? I'm just trying to think if something could stay more private within the police chief's office before being, again, just trying to think about this.
City Attorney, please.
No. The documents held by the city are held by the city, no matter whose office they are in. The city manager and I talked about, and I don't know the answer to this, how long we have to hold on to those particular kinds of documents. I don't know the answer to that time, but we've thought about that too.
Thank you, Councilor. Council members, any other questions or comments? We're still on the main motion here, since we failed a second on the motion for amendment. Okay, we're going to go to the public on this. If there's any member of the public wishing to speak to the main motion, Council, I feel like we still have left some lengthy conversation yet to be resolved, but since no one has any further comments, we will go to the public. So, Ms. Devine, please come forward. You'll need to give us your name. Then you will have 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Linda Devine, Mr. Mayor, Council. 2 weeks ago, I was really excited when you passed the ordinance. Tonight, I'm really skeptical. I'm skeptical for a couple of reasons. I don't believe for a minute that we want to background check just so that y'all know who's incarcerated to let you hire people that's been incarcerated. I don't believe that for a minute. And maybe it's the nature of the fact that I'm a criminal defense attorney that I'm skeptical. The fact that someone's criminal background is accessible by the public, yes, that's accurate, but I agree with Councilor Somerville. No one's going to go actively start looking for someone's criminal background, but the Freedom of Information Act will make it more accessible. So it's just really frustrating to me that I didn't come in because I honestly thought that there would be some city council folks that would want to amend that and to exclude it, so I guess I was wrong. I'm just really disappointed and skeptical with the way that this is going. And while I'm here, when we started talking about, like all of a sudden we're talking about a citizens academy and this and that, all of a sudden it sounds to me that we're just going to turn this advisory board into seeing what law enforcement does and how great they are. And so if that's the direction that we're going to go, my hope, and I am not joking about this, the chief, the city manager, any law enforcement that's going to be on this board, they should take 40 hours and go and spend those 40 hours with someone that's different than their race, someone that's different than their gender, someone that has a different sexual orientation, someone that has a different economic status, someone that's unhoused. So, because if you're wanting all of us on the board members to go and see what law enforcement is doing, then come out into the community and see what the community is really like. And I'm sorry, because I know I'm a little frustrated and angry, but I just got really, really disappointed in listening to all of this today. I do appreciate that for the work that you've done in getting the advisory board going, but I think we need to be careful that we don't start moving this into a cheerleading thing for law enforcement. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stein. Any other members of the public wish to speak to this item? Seeing none, we will close public comment. Council, back to you for comments. And City Clerk, just by way of a parliamentary inquiry, the mayor is not able to make a second, correct? That was my understanding.
Give me one moment, Mayor, just to verify. You normally don't make motions, but as far as second, that's a great question.
Doesn't seem like it will be meaningful, but while you're looking, City Clerk, I'm going to go to Councilor Newman. Councilor Newman, the floor is yours whenever you're ready.
My understanding, and maybe the chief to restate his comment, but anybody who goes and is going to do quote unquote work in the police department should have a background check. Chief, did I hear that right?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, and that includes our interns.
Thank you.
I have a follow-up, please. Does that include anybody who comes and volunteers there as well? So if I wanted to come for whatever reason, volunteer for 8 hours, 12 hours, 5 days, would that be something that I would have to go through as well?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Any other follow-up, Councilor Newman?
Nope, that's it for now.
Thank you. Councilor Richardson?
Could you just remind us where we are on the vote? Like what the last motion was? I'm sorry.
We're on the main motion. There has been no change. The vote we're aimed at right now would be adoption of the bylaws as written, unamended.
So, Mayor, looking at your rules of procedure, and the city attorney can correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not seeing anything specific in your rules of procedure. With you being a member of the council, I don't see any reason why you couldn't second a motion.
Thank you. Well, I wish I'd known that 15 minutes ago, but that is my own ignorance, and here we are. Councilor Pierce, please.
So I'm going to go ahead with a motion. I'm in Article 6, Section 3.
C3.
Sorry. Article 6, C3. And I move that we delete the first sentence, candidates for appointed membership on the board shall be subject to background checks.
Second.
Motion by Pierce, second by O'Doherty. Council members, any discussion on the amendment, which is to delete that first sentence? Councilor Shumway.
Yes, my question would be this. Would the Citizens Academy be held somewhere not in the police station?
Just by way of, I appreciate your question. I want an answer to it, but I'm going to keep us on the amendment just for a second so we can move through.
That's what this amendment is, isn't it?
No, this would be to remove the sentence, candidates for appointed membership of the board will be subject to background checks, is what is removed.
Okay. I want to just make a point. The chief of police said that in order for someone to go into the police station, they have to have a background check. And my understanding was the training for the Citizens Academy would be in the police station. So if we're going to do that training, it has to be somewhere other than the police station or the recreation center.
Okay, thank you, Councilor. Chief, if you want to go ahead and take that, I do think maybe I think an important distinction that the council should have right now is that we're not talking about the Citizens Academy, right? Like, that is a second conversation that is not attached to this board. The chief attached it earlier as like a way of explaining sort of the dynamic of what is happening in policing, but we're not talking about the Citizens Academy.
Do you see the second sentence?
And so, I think let's get an answer to this question because I'm interested to know, but let's, after this, I think just by way of clarity, this isn't about the Citizens Academy. That would be a whole second effort.
Sure. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't know where the Citizens Academy will be housed yet, but we are, I did say specific to non-public areas of the police department. And also we'll be having our board members going on ride-alongs and participating in tours of our dispatch facility and other areas. So those are some of the additional reasons. They'll also have access to preemptive other discussions, policy discussions, tactical discussions, other things that the public might not necessarily have direct access to, at least immediately, prior to this board.
Thank you, Chief. Okay. Councilor Somerville, then Councilor Newman.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I have a couple of questions regarding, so if we delete this, they shall be subject to a background check, but the police department is requiring anybody who's in the police department to have a background check. How are these two going to work together? Because we would be taking the exact wording out that the police department would require, so the police department would have to do it anyways. And then I guess, Mayor, the second question is without modifying the second sentence, it doesn't make any difference. A criminal history is actually a background check. It's the exact same thing. There's no difference. So if somebody could address those two, please.
Who would like to take that? City Manager.
Mayor, I think maybe the chief could help us a little bit with criminal history. I do not believe, I will stand corrected if Chief Brown feels differently, but I do not believe that a criminal history entails you calling because your neighbor's dog is barking. That is the sort of data that a background investigator might gather, but a criminal history would not include when my...
Mayor, apologies for the interruption. We just lost sound on Zoom again.
Uh-oh. Can you hear me by chance? And just maybe we'll ask the city manager?
I can.
Maybe a different microphone, city manager?
Just reiterating, I do not believe a criminal history as we will pull it. It tells anything about calls for service made by that individual. You can't hear me, Sharon? Okay.
Can you talk quite, okay, maybe try to talk quite close to the microphone.
Criminal history, unless the chief tells me I'm incorrect, criminal history was not intended to mean, nor do I believe it means, and will contain information when a citizen calls for service. My neighbor's dog is barking, please come intervene. That is not what we're pulling in a criminal history. That may come to light in a federal background investigation, but that is not a strict criminal history. Chief, am I correct? Okay, so I just want to be clear. That isn't what we're going to be pulling. We're going to be looking at criminal history, convictions, et cetera. Chief, help me if you need to clarify. And council, I'd offer this too, just to, on the amendment. If you all want to strike this entirely, that's fine. We can have this group never meet inside the police department, and that's doable. We have dozens of city facilities. They can meet right here, just like we do every single Tuesday night. But I also want to reiterate what the chief said. This group may gain information with respect to action plans. Action plans, for instance, for Jubilee Days, for large gatherings and events, where our personnel stage themselves in order to ensure safety, in order to ensure that they might see an active shooter were one to come on the scene. The action plans in Parks and Recreation about where and how we're going to mow, parks and plant trees are certainly not at the severity level of the action plans that the police department deal with. So we don't have to background anyone, and we can modify where we meet, and we can also modify the information placed in front of the group so as to not entertain risk for instance, large public gatherings. You may not know it, but your police department puts together an action plan before every Jubilee Days, before every parade, before homecoming, before major events at the university. So we can just make sure those kinds of information are not available to the board. But I didn't think that was the intent of what you had hoped. I think that I was under the impression we were hoping for more transparency. But with that transparency comes risk, more risk than you will ever entertain with your Parks and Rec Board or your Advisory Board on Disabilities or any of those other sort of more benign city services and activities.
Mayor, I have a follow-up.
Please, Councilor, and then we're going to Councilor Newman, and I don't know where.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. So I guess two pieces. If the point is to assess risk, risk is seldom assessed by a background check in terms of actual risk to that information. Criminal history, if you look at the research, it's a terrible correlation for the risk that you're talking about. So I think that that's something we certainly have to consider separately. Second, I would be curious as to why somebody needs a background check to enter the police department with the understanding that if weapons are secured and confidential information is put away under lock and key as it should be, why do we prevent citizens from going in the police department without a background check? Why is that the policy?
Mayor, I believe the chief addressed that in his opening. It's federal requirements surrounding federal data that is housed in that building, NCIC, et cetera. Brian, you can fill in if I've left anything out.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Newman and then Councilor Pierce.
So I've been against this board. And then the third reading, I think it was you, Mayor, who said we should put trust into city staff and we should put trust into our chief of police. Our chief of police is the one that's standing here telling us, like, this is a requirement for them. And he's the one that recommends this. So I don't understand why it was so easy to pass, but now it's like we don't want to listen to the chief anymore. I am all for keeping it in there, so I will probably vote no on the motion. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Pierce, please.
Yeah, thanks. Regarding the amendment and the request to have that very first sentence removed, the second sentence, which is, I think, key to all of this, reads, "The police chief shall obtain a criminal history of all applicants for membership on the board and advise the city council of any convictions for violations of federal, state, or local law." So I may be completely mistaken here, but say, for example, I'm driving and I'm weaving and the police officer pulls me over. I'm always working under the assumption that the police officer immediately checks who's in that vehicle, potentially in the vehicle driving, what my history would be based on, so I've always, and I have no idea, I have no idea what they're doing, but I feel like they know more about me when they come to ask me questions than I probably know about them, right? And I think it's a regular thing, and please correct me, but I think police officers regularly check people's background when they're doing investigations and having conversations or pulling them over or whatever. So the second sentence basically allows the police chief to check the history of the members on the board. That doesn't mean he's going to print anything. That doesn't mean there's anything, at least, in my mind, that doesn't mean that there's actually any public record, right? He just checks and goes yay or nay. And so, and Bob is here, our city attorney, maybe he can help me out, but I don't think there's going to be any public information gathered, right? He's just going to check. I mean, at least, maybe, I don't know.
And I think that's great. I'd be happy to, he can check my background and, okay. I can tell you, whatever's on there. But maybe that's it. Maybe I'm reading it wrong. But what does council think?
So you just have one page instead of 3.
No, I might have like 10 pages.
The following line, though, on that says, and advise the city council of any convictions for violations of federal, state, and local law. So as he advises us, it then becomes record, right?
But does he have to?
Well, what's the point of it if he's not actually?
He could just say, we're good. The board is good.
But if you had a criminal history, he would have to report accurately dates, what that charge was. I mean, we could assume the chief could remember all that, but I don't think that's fair. If he takes a note, that's right. Like if he jots down on a Post-it note, that would then be a public record in this case, right? So I can appreciate what you're getting at, but I think it's going to be more complicated than that.
I don't know.
I just wish it weren't, but it's going to be, right? Like, I feel like the real point here that maybe we're all circling around is there's a need for this board to meet and engage with the police department fully, right? This needs to happen at the police department, and there are requirements to do that. What we don't want is for this to be a public record that is so burdensome or potentially like maybe damaging to somebody's position in the community that they wouldn't then want to serve on this board. And if it is clear to me that by deleting the first line and then in keeping it as written beyond there, if that's clear that what we're asking for is and only any convictions for violation of federal, state, and local law, then I'm fine with it. I think that's great because it gives them the opportunity to engage with the police department in a full and complete way, which is what we want this group to do, right? We want citizens to engage in the police department. There are requirements to do that, right? Training requirements. There are, and now, a criminal history check. I don't know. I guess what I would feel like I need is some clarity that is all we're looking for, and that this language is sufficiently narrow to require the police chief to only provide that information, and then that becomes the only record made.
Or no record. He just says we're good. I advise the however many members we've met our goal.
No convictions.
But we do want, we have requested in our ordinance that one of these members have
But it doesn't have to
a
be.
criminal history. They don't have to, but we as a council adopted a resolution or an ordinance that said one of them will. We would like one of them to be if possible. But you would want to know as the hiring committee what that was, right? Like if that was somebody that was violent, that might change your opinion on whether they're the right person for this board. If they were, convicted of sedition on January 6th, you may want to know that. And that would be different than if they were, pulled over for a traffic stop.
And I hear what you're saying, but maybe the police chief, maybe the police chief could just say, of these 10 applicants, pick 5, because we've reached our goal somewhere within these 10 applicants, or however many we have. Could that work? We've reached the goal. And we don't need to know if it's 1 out of 10, 5 out of 10. I mean, he's not going to put or be okay with January 6th, dude. It's not going to happen.
It should be there should be some public accountability for who's on this board, right? And so I think who is on this board should only exist within the council's framework, not within any staff member, right? Our staff members don't pick members of any other boards, and we would be granting the police chief the authority and maybe the burden of selecting these people who then would advise him. And there's sort of like a snake eating its tail thing happening here.
Well,
I've gotten us way out of order. I apologize for that, council. I'm going to go back to calling on people and not talking, because that seems to be helpful. So Councilor Newman and then Councilor Somerville, then back to folks in the room. Sorry.
Well, the whole purpose, like city manager said, of this board is transparency. I think, and this is just me being me, I guess, transparency should be on both sides. If we want the chief and his department to be transparent, kind of like you were saying, Mayor, like we don't want the chief of police to say, hey, pick out of these 5, when that's kind of our job. But I think there should be transparency on both sides to this board, as like that's the whole purpose. If we want transparency from the police, it should be like we're working together. So there should be transparency all together. And that's kind of what I was getting from the conversation, listening to everybody. That's all I got. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Newman. Councilor Somerville?
Thank you, Mayor. I still start by saying, as I said in my first text, and this information, and my earlier motion was not intended to completely eliminate it. It was to try to have a better, well thought out policy. And I think this discussion is exactly why we need to take a minute and figure this out instead of trying to off the cuff fix this. And specifically to the amendment, if the chief pulls that history, it generates a document. That is the public record. So whether the chief only reports the convictions to the council or not, that piece is still a public document. And council, I am well aware that the solution may lie in a state legislative change to protect background check information for volunteers for municipalities. That probably is a conversation we need to have with WHAM to really make this a solid process. I'd like to see background checks across our boards for a variety of reasons, but I think we need to, again, realize that whether what's being exactly reported to council, we're still generating a public record in the background. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Somerville. Vice Mayor Cumby, please.
I'd like to call the question.
Okay, the question has been called on the amendment. Council members, before that, we need to discuss whether we're going to call the question. Council members, any questions about calling the question? Okay, seeing none, can we just go straight to the vote? Okay, great. Council members, we will vote. There needs to be a 2/3 majority to call the question. This is on the amendment. If approved, City Clerk, call the roll, please.
Mayor, just to clarify, we're calling the roll on the amendment.
I was going to have you call the roll on calling the question before the.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify because.
Thank you.
Yeah. So calling the question, Gabriel.
Yes.
Newman.
No.
O'Doherty.
No.
Pierce.
Yes.
Richardson.
Yes.
Shumway.
No.
Somerville.
No.
Cumby.
Yes.
Harrington.
Yes.
That's 5 yeses and 4 noes, Your Honor.
Okay, question has failed. We are back then to discussion on the amendment. Council members, by way of brevity, because it is getting late, let's be a little concise here. Councilor O'Doherty.
I have a point of information, I guess, a question about process. Are we able to reconsider the former amendment from Councilor Somerville?
Without a second?
I mean, okay.
Councilor Shumway.
It can be restated with some changes which would be significant enough for it to be reconsidered as a different amendment. And let me just say this. I really believe that if this is going to bog us down on this, we have to pass this resolution to adopt the bylaws. It may be better for us to omit 6.3 and then let it come back in a different form that's been thought through. Otherwise, we're going to have to postpone this whole thing, or else if we defeat it, then we're starting over from scratch.
Thank you, Councilor Shumway. I tend to agree. Any other members of the council wish to speak before the amendment? Okay, we're going to go to the public on the amendment specifically. Council, we've already gone to the public on this amendment. I'm going to go to the vote. Yeah, go ahead and come forward. We'll just go back to public comment, Council.
Paul Montoya. Just as a matter of clarification, if you do eliminate the first sentence of section C, subsection 3, I would assume that wouldn't, you'd almost have to eliminate all of the required training based on what Chief Brown has said, because naturally the training is going to have to occur at this facility, and federal requirements are going to require a background check. So it seems like if you either eliminate subsection 3 or that first sentence, you're kind of chasing your tail because you can't do your training.
Thank you, Mr. Montoya. Any other members of the public wish to speak to the amendment? Okay, seeing none. Council, we're back to you for final comments.
Can somebody just remind me what the amendment is now?
Councilor Newman, the amendment is to remove the first sentence of Article 6, Section C, 3.
Thank you.
Starting with candidates, ending with checks. Vice Mayor?
I just wanted to ask the chief, based on Mr. Montoya's comment, there seems to be a distinguishing background check, criminal history. What is required of those who enter non-public areas of the police station? Would it be like some kind of total background check, or is it criminal history?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so the requirements are set forth in Wyoming by the DCI, which is ultimately established because of NCIC and CJIS requirements. So it would be a fingerprint process where we would come back with a criminal history of convictions. So very similar to what you would get on the internet through public record. Thank you.
Chief, so it just to ask very specifically, a criminal history, if we use the words criminal history, that is sufficient?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Any follow-up? Councilor Richardson,
Are we
please.
looking for a second at this point?
No.
Okay, thank
We're
you.
about to go to the vote.
Thank you.
Maybe.
Thank you.
Theory has it we're headed to a
Really
vote.
lost me in this whole thing. Sorry, guys.
Council, any other comments before we go? I have one question, just to make sure that I'm quite clear here. City Attorney, as you read the sentences that would remain in that section, we are limiting the criminal history search to convictions for violation of federal, state, or local law, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Vice Mayor?
I just briefly want to say that I agree with the statement that Councilor Newman said, and that transparency works both ways. And we're asking through this group to gain more transparency within the police department. And in order to do that, the individuals who are on the board need to be able to fully participate. And there are rules and regulations that if we do not do this, then they cannot participate and they cannot achieve the goal of achieving transparency. So that's all.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I found that persuasive as well. Councilor Doherty and then Councilor Shumway.
I thought we established that this group doesn't have to meet in non-public places. And I also thought they were open meetings anyway. So I don't think we're chasing our tail here. I think we can get rid of that sentence. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Doherty. Councilor Shumway?
I believe there's two very distinct types of background checks. One that just gets, it's a $5 very quick check, and then there's the one that goes into the criminal investigations. And I think we're eliminating the one which is just a cursory background check, and we're probably getting to the more expensive one where we're looking into the criminals. And if I'm wrong, I'd like to know, because that's what we're going to be voting on.
Staff, do we have an answer to that question? Chief, City Attorney, do we have an answer to whether or not this is a sort of like intensive background check, a deep intensive background check, or more of like a 30,000-foot view?
That's right up the chief's alley.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So it's public records. It's basically what it's doing is compiling those public records through a national database. And to Councilmember Somerville's point, there are some jurisdictions that don't report, but the majority, to my knowledge, do report. And I don't believe I don't believe DCI charges $5. I believe it's 10. So a little more.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Used to be 5.
Inflation. Okay, folks, we're going to move to the vote, if everybody feels nothing's pressing. Okay, City Clerk, you can call the roll. Council members, just so that it's clear, this vote is on whether or not a yes on this removes the first sentence, a no keeps it as it is. City Clerk, call the roll.
Pierce.
Yes.
O'Doherty.
Yes.
Newman.
No.
Gabriel.
No.
Richardson.
Yes.
Somerville.
No.
Shumway.
No.
Cumby.
Yes.
Harrington.
Yes.
That's 5 yeses and 4 noes, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you, City Clerk. That amendment has been approved. Council, we're back on the main motion. Any other conversation on the main motion? We're going to go to the public once again, since there's been some changes. Any members of the public wishing to speak to this main motion as amended? Raise your hand if you're on Zoom. Seeing none, back to the council for comments. Councilor Pierce?
I was going to call the question.
Okay, don't worry about it, we're getting there.
Okay.
City Clerk, you can call the roll on the bylaws as amended.
Gabriel.
Yes.
Newman.
Yes.
O'Doherty.
Yes.
Pierce.
Yes.
Richardson.
Yes.
Shumway.
Yes.
Somerville.
Yes.
Cumby.
Yes.
Harrington.
Yes.
That's 9 yeses and 0 noes, Your Honor.
Thank you, City Clerk. That item has been approved. Got through it, Council.
We're only like halfway there.
All right, we only have a few moments. We are then going to move on to item 17.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Cumby.
Thank you. I move to approve Resolution 2023-52, appointing a nominating committee to recommend a slate of candidates and terms of office to establish the Laramie Police Citizen Advisory Board and authorize the mayor and clerk to sign.
Second.
Motion by Cumby, second by Gabriel.
Mayor,
Yeah.
if I could just have a clarification that the citizen is not in the official title of the board anymore.
So you included Laramie Citizen Police Advisory.
So it's just the Laramie Police Advisory Board. I apologize, we didn't
So
catch that.
just shouldn't be in there.
I amend, I remove it.
Second agrees.
Okay, second agrees. We are square. Thank you, City Clerk. City Manager, to you, please.
Mayor and council, this is fairly self-explanatory. As this is a new board and you have to appoint an entirely new, a new board in its entirety, a nominating committee is sort of the customary way to go about that. So if you have any questions or would like me to clarify anything, happy to.
Thank you, City Manager. Council members, we went ahead and decided that this should be one member from each ward. The wards then had a quick conversation and came up with a list that I have. I don't know if anybody wants to take this and make an amendment to include the names before we move forward.
Okay. I move to approve Resolution 20, or would I just do the member? Oh, I move to amend Resolution 2023-52, Section 2, to assign council members. Ward 1, Vice Mayor Cumby. Ward 2, Councilor Jane Pierce. Ward 3, Councilor Pat Gabriel.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, motion by Vice Mayor Cumby, second by Councilor Doherty. Council members, we are on the amendment now. Any questions about the amendment? Okay, we will go to members of the public. Any members of the public wish to speak to this item? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Back to the council for comments. Councilor Pierce, please.
Yeah, thank you. Just to be clear, I did not have a discussion with Brandon, Counselor Newman.
Okay.
So,
Thank you, Councilor Pierce.
yeah, I didn't. And I talked to Andy about the topic, but I didn't really talk to her about this either.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. That is my mischaracterization only. I apologize for that.
I just jumped in there because I wanted to do it.
Sure. So Councilor Newman in Somerville, if you have strong opinions, you're welcome to object. Okay, I'm not.
No, I'm not going to.
Okay. Thank you, Councilor Newman. Thank you to the council members that offered to serve. These are always quite a lift. City Clerk, you can call the roll on the amendment.
Richardson.
Yes.
Shumway.
Yes.
Newman.
Yes.
Somerville.
Yes.
Gabriel.
Yes?
O'Doherty.
Yes.
Pierce.
Yes.
Cumby.
Yes.
Harrington.
Yes.
That's 9 yeses and 0 nos, Your Honor.
Thank you, City Clerk. The amendment has been adopted. Council members are back to the main motion. Any other? Councilor Somerville, please.
Mayor, just a quick question. So this is just establishing the nominating committee. We haven't done a resolution to assign a council liaison. Is that coming at a later date?
Councilor Somerville, the intention is that that member will come forward with the approval of the candidates for the board. So we have not.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. Good question. Okay, we'll go to the public. Any members of the public wish to speak to the main motion? Seeing none, we will close the public comment period. Back to the council for any comments. City Clerk, you can call the roll.
Gabriel.
Yes?
O'Doherty.
Yes.
Richardson.
Yes.
Somerville.
Yes.
Newman.
Yes.
Pierce.
Yes.
Shumway.
Yes.
Cumby.
Yes.
Harrington.
Yes.
That's 9 yeses and 0 nos, Your Honor.
Thank you, City Clerk. That item has been approved. We'll move on to item 18, public comments. Any members of the public wish to speak to the council? Go ahead and come forward if you're in the room, or raise your hand on Zoom. Please, Mr. Vine. And give us your name one more time, if you would not mind.
I will. Linda Devine. I know it's long, so I'll keep this brief. A couple of things. I know you probably can't change it, but sitting back there and listening to everybody is frustrating that you're not able to interact sometimes. I understand the whole process and the rules and all of that stuff, but it is frustrating. But I wanted to comment on one thing about the transparency piece. The advisory board's not in a position of authority. The reason we need transparency of law enforcement is to look at those excessive use of force or implicit bias and those different things. So, I mean, I have no problem with anybody knowing my background check. You're probably going to find a misdemeanor or two. I don't care. But to say that the board should be transparent because we want law enforcement to be transparent, I think that's not really justified, because I can't pull somebody over based on the color of her skin. I can't knock somebody out because they annoy me. Not saying that that's all happens, I'm just saying I'm not the one that needs to be transparent. And so I just think that that might be a little off. Just my thoughts. I do appreciate y'all. I know it's been a long night, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Devine. Any other members of the public wish to speak to the council? Come forward or raise your hand on Zoom. Okay, seeing none, we're going to close the public comment period. Council, any consideration for future work session topics? Okay. We will then go to the vice mayor. Nope. Councilor Pierce. My goodness, it's getting late. For item 20.
Great. I move that we adjourn to executive session regarding litigation, Wyoming statute 16-4-405, lowercase a, Roman numeral 3, and land negotiations, Wyoming statute 16-4-405, lowercase a, Roman numeral 7.
Second.
Motion by Pierce, second by Doherty. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, council members, we are adjourned to executive session.
Can I ask, I think